We're almost ready. They're typing. We're on.
It's gonna be fine. We're just
Okay,
chatting.
we're ready. Hi, welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us for the fifth Women in Animation Bay Area chapter. YouTube. Okay. Hi, welcome everyone. Thank you all for joining us for our fifth Women in Animation Bay Area chapter YouTube live question and answer event. We hope that this series can bring on guests and provide some education, resources, and a little entertainment to amazing women, transgender, non-binary, and all underrepresented gender identity communities who want to pursue and thrive in the animation industry. So please subscribe, and we welcome you to put questions or topics you want us to talk about in the chat, and we'll do our best to answer them today. Today we'll be chatting with Crystal Godat about building and maintaining an online presence as an artist in the animation industry. Crystal has worked as an animator at mobile game and tech companies in the Bay Area, such as Big Fish and Facebook, all while growing a significant following online and maintaining her presence through not just social media channels, but also gallery shows and conventions. Thanks so much for joining us, Crystal.
Hi.
Okay, so to start us off, you currently have about 10,000 followers on Instagram, and you share your work across several platforms. Could you tell us a little bit about how you got started using social media and building your following in art?
Yeah. So I mean, I started sharing my art on Blogger way back in the day. In that was kind of like the first platform I shared any art on, and I think as like the years went by and different things were coming out, and I didn't get a Twitter until like maybe 2009 or something like that, but I didn't really post any art on that um, at that time. But then I think after Twitter, and there's like Tumblr and Instagram, Facebook, and there's all that stuff. I think uh, growing the following it wasn't, I guess, the forefront of my mind. And as far as like posting stuff, it was just uh, I just wanted to like share what I did, and that in all the drawings that I have. And
Yeah. Did you get started like as a student, or you waited till later in your career? Or?
well, I guess so. I started as a student like in college, so maybe like second semester of freshman year. I didn't really start posting until then, and it was really just like sketches and stuff in my sketchbook. And at the time, I didn't really have like a lot of the digital tools that are available now. Um, and I guess like a part of me thought that I needed those tools in order to like post or share online. Like I didn't have a DeviantArt, which I know like that was like the thing to have back then. Um, but I mean, it also didn't like come across my mind to like, oh, I could take a photo of my sketchbook and then share that. Or I guess like I always had a thought like I had to scan all of my drawings in order for them to be online. Like I didn't get my first like actual drawing tablet until maybe like 2011, 2012. Um, and then I think once I kind of discovered drawing in Photoshop and everything, that's when like I started discovering like, oh, people share their work online. And but I definitely had some fear of like, oh, I don't know if I want to post anything. And but then I think over the years, like, I mean, especially now when you look on my Instagram, there's like kind of everything and anything on there as far as like the type of art I produce and everything like that.
Um, did you have what were some of like your motivations when you first started posting to Instagram and Twitter, like to start the social media, just to like share your work, or did you see it as something that was going to grow your career later?
I think a lot of it was I my motivation was just getting over the big hurdle of just sharing my work, because I definitely consider myself an introvert of a person. And I think a lot of people who know me will find that surprising. They're like, really, you're an introvert? I'm like, well, I know how to pretend to be an extrovert when I need to be. And it's always that like that fear of I guess rejection or like people not liking it, or like I would put this into the ether and it doesn't really matter, and it I think so. I think at first the motivation would have to be kind of like figuring out the tools, really, especially like back then. I think when I first started kind of exploring posting online, it was mainly like, okay, well, besides like, because I mean, I knew what posting online was like with like Xanga and stuff like that, like actual blogs, but like the concept of an art blog and sharing your art that way was definitely still new to me. And then I think as social media really started to kind of like take the forefront of everything, like everything in our world. And I think as those things were rolling out, it was just like another tool or another, thing I had to figure out, like, how does this work? And so things like hashtags, like at the beginning of like me when I first started Twitter, and then or even like first started using Instagram, I had no idea like what hashtags were and or like what effect they had on a post and stuff like that. So I think like my earlier intentions was just really figuring out what is this, and then and I guess like, well, what do I use this for? And a lot of it was like stumbling along the way and trying to figure out how can I make this work for me. And I think like with Instagram in particular, when I first I shouldn't say discovered, when I was first told about Instagram, I was just kind of like messing with like their internal tools, and I was just sharing like just random pictures or like pictures I've taken on my phone or whatever. And then it wasn't until maybe like after a few months of just using it, that's when I was like, oh, well, maybe I should make one for art, because at the time I had like a blog spot I was sharing art on. And then also around that time, I was already having like a Tumblr, both like things you just reblog stuff on and like things you would actually post art to. And so this was like, with Instagram, it was just kind of like another tool in the tool belt of social media sort of thing.
Awesome. Yeah. As because you've did your following grow? Did you ever notice like there was a point where like your following had grown? And you're like, okay, yeah, now I finally have a lot of followers, or like now I finally found what I need to do to grow my following in the way I'm looking to grow it.
I think I didn't really start to take. I guess like the whole like follower count really didn't, at least in regards to art, I didn't really start paying attention to that until like, I don't know, maybe like late junior year of college. And that's like when like a sketch that I posted got like 50 likes. I'm like, whoa, that's cool. And I'm like, I didn't know people would like this. Like 50 people liked it. So, yeah. But I think as far as I really didn't start seeing any, I guess, growth until I think maybe like towards the end of college. And I think a lot of that comes to noticing as I was like posting more with like more of the intention of just like, I'm just gonna treat this like I did my art blog, and like, but this is more like picture heavy to where like you're seeing the image first and like, the caption comes secondary. So, and I think that's how I was really treating it early in like the early Instagram, where I was really just treating it like an art blog. And and I think once I started noticing, I guess, people noticing my work and everything, I guess that's when I started to pay attention, like, okay, well, why do they like it? And, people will comment every once in a while and they're like, oh, I really like your rhythm in your sketches, or I really like how appealing this character is, stuff like that. But then I also started noticing like the patterns as far as like when a lot of people were looking at it, and also in the early versions of Instagram, you didn't have like all those analytical tools or the different versions of Instagram of like, you have a professional account or you have like a business account. All of it was just like one version of it, right? And everyone had the same tools. Um, and I think that's when I started noticing, well, and this is also when everything was chronological. You saw everything chronologically. I mean, and that's when you're scrolling forever because, like, well, I got to make sure I saw everything until I caught up with it, right? And so, and I think when I noticed that, that's when I really started leveraging, like, okay, well, if this is being posted all chronologically, and if I want more people to see what I'm doing, then maybe I should post kind of like in the morning where people are commuting, because usually when people are commuting, they're like on their phones, waiting to get to where they are, and or when they're on the way home. So like kind of like around the 9 o'clock range, and then maybe around the 5 o'clock range, and that's when I noticed that people were a little bit more active, and that's when I also started like looking into, well, what are these like hashtag things doing, and and honestly, a lot of it was just a bunch of experimentation. And because you didn't have those analytical tools to tell you, like, oh, on these days, the people are active on Thursdays and Fridays, or you didn't have any of those specific tools available for you. And a lot of it was just trial and error, like you wanting to try posting at this time versus this time. And then, um, so I think as far as like seeing the growth, or at least noticing when it started happening, a lot of it was just because I feel like sometimes it's also luck of the draw, when maybe like at the time of that old version of the algorithm, like it was able to push what you had, and because it was chronological, I think that played in a lot of people's favors to like gain traction for different artists and stuff. Like even if like for me, because I never had a following on any other platform, like I wasn't an original DeviantArt artist or anything like that, or whatnot. So being able to I guess kind of cultivate that on this platform itself, like the Instagram is kind of like my main platform that I post, because it's I think now, especially kind of figuring out how to use the tools to what I want to use them for, it's definitely like my preferred platform to post art on.
Definitely. Would you? So, is your strategy mostly to? I'm sorry for the background noise. The mostly to post like things that you like and things that you enjoy making, and or do you focus on something like how to develop your career? Like, how do you decide what to post on Instagram and what stays in your sketchbook?
And that's a good question. And I think at first, when I was, if you, I mean, especially if you go and actually scroll all the way down to the bottom of my Instagram, you'll notice that like a lot of the stuff I was posting was a lot of like sketches, and just kind of like almost anything that I drew in my sketchbook. Um, and I think most of that intention was just because I was treating it like an art blog. I was mainly posting content of me documenting my journey as an artist, to like see a progression of like how am I improving in like my character design, how am I improving in my understanding of anatomy, stuff like that. And um, it I think, and I'll totally admit, I fell victim into uh, starting to post content or create content specifically to cater to people, or to, there was definitely a chunk of time where I felt like I had to create art because that's what I think people want to see, versus just creating things that I was interested in. Um, I do think every artist kind of goes through that, especially now in this whole world of social media. I don't. I would be surprised to hear if someone didn't go through that. I mean, if you didn't, great job on you. So, um, and I think like doing that, I started to see myself burn out faster And artistic burnout, as you all know, totally sucks. And because I wasn't creating for myself anymore, I would be creating for others. And if, let's say, like I would post, I don't know, like maybe a sketch of a cute anthropomorphic puppy or something, and but it no one really liked it. I didn't like, and like the engagement on it wasn't so good, and then I was like, oh, like nobody liked them because nobody likes my art, and I would be really hard on myself. But that's not the point, So it so stuff like that would be like I would be my own worst critic in creating that own toxic environment, and versus just like posting things I like, hey, I like this sketch, check it out, versus me creating something very specific to cater to certain people. Uh, so I think definitely, like looking back on it, I originally I didn't really have a strategy of posting things. I was just kind of sharing everything I had, and then I kind of dipped into like, okay, well, what do people want to see? I think this is what people want to see, and then I think as I was starting to experience more burnout, I wanted to try harder to create things that I want to, the things that I think I like, and if I choose to share it, then I'll share it, and I think over time, um, I mean, like my feed's definitely not curated by any means if you take a look at it, but I definitely became a little bit more choosy on like sharing uh, sharing all the sketches versus just like one or two that I like.
Mm-hmm. So you use, it seems like kind of a balance between like sharing what you like and sharing what you enjoy making and what is interesting to you, and then also like balancing out with like what the algorithm might be looking for. Like, because I know like my Instagram is full of sketches and it does not do so well. So
Well, and I think that's interesting because I've posted like full illustrations, like fully finished and polished things, and and it did okay, but a lot of my sketches actually do better because I think that also shows your thinking and how
mhm,
you are approaching a subject matter, and I think because it has like that roughness to it, it's not perfected, and I think now we're in a place in social media where like perfection is not what people want. Like they want to see a little bit more realness to what they're viewing on social media, and so I do think that's why like the posts that I do make with like rougher sketches do better than like fully polished things, because you know to maybe the average Joe, some people think like, oh, you just press a button and there it is, it's all done, right? Versus like showing them the process of like, well, okay, this is where I started and this is where I ended up.
mhm,
Yeah.
definitely. Um, have you ever had, or do you have any tips on for people who are students or younger people looking to post online or start posting online and build their following, for how to like get over that fear of what to post, or start putting themselves online, or putting their art online and sharing their work?
Um, I think honestly, I think the biggest thing I could say is create for yourself and not to cater to others. And I feel like it sounds really cliche to say because I feel like everyone says that you got to do it for yourself, don't do it for others. But I think it really is true, because like the more you're doing it to please other people, you're sucking the joy out of what you feel is like your favorite hobby or whatnot. And I think that is kind of like the biggest thing as far as when you want to share your work. And as far as fear, honestly, it was like a band-aid. You just got to do it. Even if like your first post is like, for example, if it was on like Tumblr or a blogger or whatever, even if that first post was like private, but you just needed to get that first one out of the way, just like, okay, it wasn't so bad, because it's not like when you click a button something catastrophic is going to happen. Nothing happens. And so
Right.
um, it it really is just, and I think that obviously the more you do it, you're like, okay, well, this is it's not so bad. And I think for me, there's always going to still be an underlying amount of concern of like, well, if I share this, how like will people like it? Especially if it's like something that's out of my comfort zone, if it's something that because I'm trying to experiment or like explore a new subject that I grew interest in and I wanted to share something that of me taking a stab at a subject matter, there's always going to be like an underlying concern of whether or not people will like it. And I wish I could say that that will go away. Um, at least in my experience so far, it hasn't 100% gone away, but I think it's definitely less than how it was before. That's for sure.
Sorry, I forgot I muted myself. Sorry. Have you ever, going along with that and the fear, and have you ever experienced a time when you had negative reactions to what you were posting or what you were sharing with people online?
Let me tell you. So, there are two specific incidences I've experienced specifically on Instagram, um, where I had there. I mean, both were negative, but so the first thing that comes to mind was so back in 2016 after the election, um, I was asked by a small studio to help design and do like design work for the women's march, and we did a animated short for that. So I was designing like the crowds and some of the buildings and some of the characters that would appear in there. And so once we were all finished, and then the ad went live and everything, I shared that version of the ad on my Instagram. Um, and it was definitely polarizing, and that was probably the most comment field I've seen on my Instagram, filled both with like love and hate for it. Like it was super polarizing, and there's definitely a few comments that I did not agree with, and I had to really fight back to not engaged in the trolls because obviously they're trying to do that to get a reaction from me, and it's not like what I'm going to say to them is going to change their mind. That's obviously how they're going to think, and that's what they want to think, and that's, I mean, obviously you're totally entitled to your opinion. But I think especially during that time, I think in general, when something super negative like that happens, and especially if it's like something you are very proud of, it does kind of hurt a little bit, when you get like those certain comments. And I think that just goes with internet culture in general. And when you get those, especially if you're putting out something that you're proud of and you're like, hey, guys, check this out. I'm super proud of what I did here with this team or whatever it is. And then you get those people that they're just there to just throw hate into the field and then leave, So um, it that's definitely like a negative thing that I will always remember. Um, but then I had to really remember like, okay, obviously I can't change those people's minds. But then that's when I also noticed that like when I make my views the forefront, or I'm using my platform to push those views into the light, that's when um, I, I got comments and people saying, well, I was just here for the art. I wasn't here for politics. And they would leave. I'm like, well, fine. You don't want to be here. That's cool with me. I mean, like, but if I have a platform that people really do enjoy my art, then why not use the platform to push issues and causes that I find important to me? And I think that's what people should do to help really push good into the world, especially now, right? So, and another negative incident that I will always also remember is my very first time experiencing art theft. And It was when after, I think it was after Last Jedi had come out in theaters, after I had watched that movie. And this was also around the time I finally upgraded to an iPad Pro, and I was really getting into Procreate and everything. And I really wanted to sketch the porgs because they were really cute creatures, and I'm like, I want to take a stab at drawing some porgs, you know. And so I did a couple sketches and I posted them, and because I really enjoyed those characters or those creature designs in that movie, and I wanted to, you know, have a little fan art moment and show like this is I appreciated them, but here's my twist to those creatures. I got a lot of great feedback on that. So great of feedback, someone decided to rip me off. So, um, but what was interesting though is that I wouldn't have known that had happened if it wasn't for the person who ripped me off tagging me in that ripped off art. So it it was funny because so like I saw the tag, you know, in my notifications, like, oh, let's see what it is. And it was clear that she had just traced over my sketches to the T. It wasn't like she was taking my interpretation of these characters and doing it in her own way as well. Like she just straight up traced to them. And so I messaged her privately and saying, you know, hey, I'm not really cool with what you did because you clearly just traced over my drawing. And you know, she had the argument of, oh, well, you know, I still credited you. I'm like, that's still not the same thing. and and so she ended up pulling the post down, but then she reposted it again. But the only thing that she did was add hats to them. And I was like, that's still the same stolen art. You just added hats to them. That still doesn't fix the problem. It was just hard, like when you get those people that just doesn't understand the concept of that. And it really, it was definitely like I felt in a way violated as someone would if someone stole like your art, right? And but it was a moment when I kind of brought to light like, hey, this person like totally just ripped me off, and it was so incredible to see like the art community come together, and they actually just defended me. They're like, hey, this isn't right, you clearly traced her drawing, you should take it down. And she kept saying that, no, I created these poses on my own. Like, no, there's a clear comparison. You look at mine versus hers. And but that was definitely a moment where I was so I was actually relieved that the art community really kind of came through for me, and there's definitely a positive ending to it, because even though that was such a negative experience for me, it was definitely seeing like all these artists, whether I was friends with them or not, acquaintances or even strangers who just follow my art, like seeing people that coming to my defense or whatever, was actually really nice. Yeah.
Do you have any advice for like others who might experience like either like negative comments or like having to deal with the same type of issue, someone stealing your work, or how to best deal with that, or how to best after it happens, how to feel like you can continue posting and maintaining your channel?
Yeah, so I think when you experience something like that, it can be super discouraging for sure. I think the best thing I could say is that, I mean, I think a lot of this comes from like through art school, developing that thick skin through like class critiques and feedback and stuff. And it was definitely, I think in the back of my mind, I was always afraid of someone like stealing my art or whatever, or like using it to be printed on shirts or something without my permission. There's always going to be like that underlying fear of that, but it shouldn't be to the point where like it cripples you or like stops you from sharing your art. And obviously, like if it does happen, I would say obviously just try to approach it civilly. be civil about it first. Don't come at it hot and like start going at them with rage, but definitely try to be reasonable. And if that doesn't work, it's hard just because I think like putting them like in public as far as like calling them out definitely helped, because then it brings to light, kind of like when we bring to light causes that are important to us, when we bring those to light too, right? So I think even though it's going to be discouraging with something negative or negative comments or trolls or people stealing your art, like it could feel exhausting trying to deal with it, but know that you also have like that network of people that care about you and that will support you, and don't be afraid to ask for help if like someone's just not like being cool or like not being reasonable with you. And because like this network that you end up building through either social media or even through conventions, when you showcase your work that way, you develop like this like the circle of friends, right? Both online and offline, and they're always going to be there to help you, and don't be afraid to ask for help.
Definitely. And I know like when we talked a lot about like conventions and building in conjunction with social media to build your presence, and also how in your career as a different form of networking that you don't really see, or that you may not have thought about it.
Mm-hmm.
Can you talk a little bit about your experience, like how doing the conventions or maybe your gallery shows, or how that folded into like your helping to build your social media, and how maybe your social media like went together with those two?
Yeah. So I grew up in San Diego, so Comic-Con has always just been kind of in my life. So I knew that like, tables of like people's art and stuff, they existed, but it wasn't until I went to APE, the Alternative Press Expo back in, I believe 2011, when it used to be in San Francisco, when I actually saw like friends of school like tabling there. I was like, wait, I could do this. And but so seeing like peers of mine doing it encouraged me. I'm like, hey, well, this could be fun to do as like a hobby. And a thing that I love doing at conventions is collect people's business cards and like, seeing how they designed it and checking out their work online and stuff like that. And so I think when I started doing conventions, my first one was APE when it was back in San Jose. Needless to say, that was probably the worst first experience I've ever had at a convention. I mean, there was definitely like highlights to it, but it was a rough first start in the convention circuit. And I met a lot of people that I follow online that would normally table at conventions, and it was a great opportunity to meet them face to face and to kind of like build those connections in person versus just being online. And I think going to conventions or Comic Cons or stuff like that is a great opportunity to not only just build relationships in person, but then that's like a great way to build like a physical network outside of just like the internet social network, if that makes sense. And so doing those conventions, like, I will definitely notice when after like I would do a convention, I'll see like people, like new followers, finding me on Instagram or Twitter, mainly on Instagram. And because they'll pick up my business card or something at a convention, and basically, so once I started seeing that, I was like, okay, well, this is cool. Like, I mean, not only am I getting my work out there, I'm also like making connections, meeting new people. And I mean, conventions are very exhausting, like because you're meeting so many people when you're behind that table. And it is very reminiscent of my old art retail job when I was a caricature artist at the San Diego Zoo. It's a lot of FaceTime. You're seeing a lot and meeting a lot of different people from all walks of life. And so same thing in conventions too. But when I noticed that like my Instagram was starting to get more eyes on it, that's when I definitely got like my first opportunity to participate in a gallery show, because they saw my work online. Even it could even go as far as like me commenting on like maybe someone that I'm following, be like, I'll leave a comment on like their post, like, oh, I love your line work on this, and or whatever. And so this curator from a little small shop down in LA reached out to me and was like, hey, I think you'd be a great fit for this fan art gallery show. And, and at the time when that happened, that was probably like 2014, I think. That's when I started realizing like, oh, wait, these fan art gallery shows are a thing. It's like a less intimidating version of like a she art gallery at like a real museum, So it seeing that like that's a thing, it was like kind of like conventions. It kind of got me hooked. Like, oh, I want to do this too because it's kind of fun. I get to create art and then also showcase it, but in a different way, right? And but then also being able to like be in a gallery also with artists that either admire or follow for a long time, and then being able to showcase my art with theirs, is also a great opportunity to, again, when you go to the show, you get to build that network in person. And I will say that like those opportunities doing those gallery shows for what I guess seems like about 4 or 5 years straight, I think really did actually kind of help me career-wise, because even though those opportunities either at conventions or gallery shows they weren't a direct like, hey, I saw you at a convention, here's a job. It was never really like that. It was more like, hey, I remember seeing your work at Silicon Valley, or I remember seeing your work at this gallery show I went to. And then like meeting those people face to face, and then getting to know them that way. And then when I would like apply for a job or whatever, and if that person happens to be working at that, like at X company, they're like, I remember your work and I really enjoy that. I think I would really think you'd be a great fit for this team. So in that way, you can think of it as like a big domino effect by showcasing your art in conventions or in gallery shows whenever you can. It's kind of like in social media too, in like the ether of Instagram, you never know who comes across your work. So, and that's also a great way of thinking about it too, when you're posting online, is that like, as long as you're proud of it and you're doing it for yourself, who knows, like if someone who's a recruiter or someone who's a director somewhere, and they're like, I really like this person's stuff, like I'm going to remember that person. And especially like if you are meeting those people at, I mean, obviously not right now, but back when we can go outside, when you're meeting those people in person and making those connections, like that also just goes such a long way, when you're making that face-to-face contact with people.
Yeah, definitely. As you've developed in your career, has your goals for your social media changed now that you're a little bit more established, and how might you be using it to like further your career in the direction you want to develop it ultimately, and using social media to get there?
That's a good question too. I think my goals initially was definitely more of like, I'm just going to share my work. And then, I think my goals, and I think with anybody, like your goals end up changing as you change yourself as a person. So, back in school, my goal was to I need to just share my work and put it out there. And then once I became like a professional working artist in the tech industry and in mobile games, then my goals were like, I just need to post to show that I'm still relevant. And then like obviously I also struggled through that pitfall of like, oh, your count is the measurement of your success, which obviously it is not. But when I was getting myself out of that burnout, then my goal was to like, I need to actually really just start doing this for myself and not be afraid to experiment different styles or different subject matters and stuff like that. And I think when you do look at my Instagram, you do see that evolutionary change. And even when I look back at my old drawings, either in the sketchbook or, the copious amount of files on my computer or in Procreate. And seeing that like change of like, oh, this is how I used to draw. And I mean, like, I can still draw like that, but I've preferred to draw in this new way because I found that simplifying it this way, I find more appealing or whatever. And so I think now, kind of fast forwarding to now, as far as like my goals are, like, I definitely want to take more time to show the process, and not only to show people the process behind what I do, but then also so I can remember what it's like to enjoy the process too. So it really goes back to the original intention of creating for yourself and putting it out there. And if people like it, cool. If not, that's fine too. And so I think there's like so many, there's a lot of personal projects that I have on the back burner. But one, for example, is that I have like a dialogue test that I've been wanting to do for the longest time of Maya Angelou reciting her poem. And but I want to document the process of like, these are my sketches for character designs. This is how I'm testing out in animation software, and like, here's my keys and my breakdowns, and like really showing that process, because not only does it hopefully bring to light not only the hard work that goes into a 10-second animation, but also kind of like, it will help me fall back in love with what I do, if that makes sense too. Because like, I think as a working artist, when you're drawing 9 to 5 all the time, and when you can't share any of that work because it's under NDA, but then you're like, well, I want to share some stuff online, but I can't share any of the stuff that I did at work. But that means I got to draw more. But what if I just want to watch TV? So then it becomes like another job, and you don't want another job, because the other job, you can't just be spewing creativity 24/7. And I think a lot of that falls back to how it was in school, where like, if you're not drawing 24/7, you don't want this bad enough. And I think now as a working artist, like, you have to be okay with not creating anything, and that's okay. Like, I've definitely become very familiar with that over the past few months, where like, I would, or even like sketching something and not share it, because I just did it for myself, because maybe I want to improve on something. But you don't have to share it, right? So, because you don't have to keep proving to other people like, I am putting in the work, and that's definitely what you shouldn't feel like you have to do. You're putting in the work because you want to, and you don't have to let everybody know. You don't have to show your receipts basically for every single thing that you do, right? So just to show that you're relevant, or that you're worthy, or anything like that. And it just feeds into like your mental health, and being kind to yourself, and being willing to fall back a few steps but keep moving forward.
Definitely, yeah. It seems like as you grow as an artist, you have more space to say, like you said, now you don't have to like prove that you're doing the work, and that it's inspiring to hear it from someone who has a strong following, because the pressure of like, I don't have to post all the time to maintain like presence in social media either. So we have some audience questions now.
I'll do my best to answer.
Yeah. So our first one is there a certain time of day that you prefer to post?
Nowadays, I think I try to just post like maybe sometime in the afternoon. And here's the thing. Instagram's algorithm is so jacked, where like, it doesn't make any sense. You can't predict how it works. So at least now you definitely can't predict, because like, once you like feel like you figure it out, it's going to change again, because like, those algorithms, they're going to be ever changing. And I think I think honestly, post whenever you want. I'm not going to tell you what to do, but I think I mean, obviously, if your goal is for growth, then I mean, obviously, like maybe check out those analytical tools that are now available in Instagram. Um, and then that could possibly kind of give you some insight on when people are on more, or what time of day. Um, I think I feel like I've kind of given up on like figuring out when the peak times are when my stuff will show up, because like now the algorithm is, I mean, it could definitely have changed already, but like it's when you're getting more engagement, it pushes your posts further up the timeline for people to see. And so that's why I was just like, you know what, I'm just gonna post when I post, and if that works, cool. If not, then that's fine too. And I think you just have to be okay that it's not gonna be um, a home run every time, right? So I think like be willing to experiment with different times.
Definitely. Um, do you have any advice for artists who, sorry, do you have any advice for artists who would love a social media presence, but it's harder for them to keep up a consistent posting schedule for their art? I think you kind of touched on it, I think, in your last one too.
Can you repeat the question one more time?
Sorry. Do you have advice for artists who would love a social media presence, but it's harder for them to keep a consistent posting schedule?
That's a good question. Yeah, I think I did kind of briefly touch on that. I think I'll still stand by with what I said as far as like, I feel like it's just if you want to be in that, so if you want to build a social presence, you just gotta rip the Band-Aid off. Just start, even if you're starting off small. Like for example, like maybe share art that you enjoy. Like if I'm finding, let's say I see my friends post and I really enjoy that piece that they did or that sketch that they posted, I'll share it to my Instagram stories. There's so many ways now to share art and post art. Like it could be as small as just like sharing to Instagram stories because it's only there for 24 hours. And if that's also another way to kind of like slowly build your presence, because now, because like back then we didn't have any of that, right? Instagram was much simpler back then, but now with like live video, with now reels or short form video, kind of like TikTok, or stories, there's all these different surfaces to share anything on. And so even if you're starting off small like that, that's a great way to kind of get comfortable with being present on social media. But then also like create a schedule that works for you. Obviously, like I feel like you shouldn't adhere to any formula that someone puts out there, or whatever like YouTube video says this is what you do because it makes you successful. Like don't listen to any of that crap, because I feel like it's not a one size fit all sort of situation. You need to make this work for you, not you working for it.
Definitely. So our third question is, as an introvert, what tips do you have for interacting with fans or potential fans at cons?
That's a good question. I think, okay, so I think this really stems back to, so when I worked as a caricature artist and a body artist at the San Diego Zoo, I was told that, because in that job you strive to make commission, right? Which is better than making hourly, because hourly there was only like $8 an hour. But if you make commission, you get a higher wage. And so knowing that I had to literally hustle to get people to sit so I could draw them or paint their face or whatever, I had to become really comfortable with that idea that like every person I talk to passing by may not interact with me. And it definitely took me a while to get comfortable with that idea. Also, what really helped in that particular situation was wearing sunglasses so they could not see my eyes when I was doing that. And, but I mean, I think in general, as an introvert, to try to like get over the hump of like, especially at conventions, I definitely treat it like how I was working at that caricature job, and that's kind of how I approached working a table at conventions. But it definitely doesn't have the pressure of like, if I don't make these sales, I'm not getting paid. You're just there to share your art and have fun. Like, and that's what conventions are supposed to be about. And if you sell stuff, that's great. If not, that's fine too. I mean, like, okay, well, I shouldn't say that's fine too, because like you're spending a lot of money to produce all this stuff and to buy a table, right? So I think for conventions, I always say, hey, as long as I make back table cost, I'm fine. I'd be okay walking away from that. And so let me turn on this light. So basically, like I think also like the display when you're at your table kind of helps as a buffer to kind of put a little bit of distance between people. But I think when like people come up and they're like, hey, I saw your stuff on Instagram, or I saw your stuff on Twitter, or wherever it is, right? Like I saw your work online, like I really love your stuff. And if it's like someone that's like gushing over you, I mean, like, I think as long as you approach it as like as humble as you can, make sure you take a piece of that humble pie. Because in the end, you're just another person. They're just another person. You're not any better or any less than them. And I think I'm also that person that has a very hard time taking compliments. But I think in the end, just be humbled by the fact that people enjoy your work. And I think if you're just honest, or like, oh, sorry, I'm just nervous, or like, hey, like I'm not great at talking with people, but thank you so much for appreciating my work. I think the authenticity and the honesty is more appreciated than trying to muster up like a fake persona to pretend that like I'm this confident person. And if you're able to pretend to be confident as a coping mechanism, then good for you. But that's kind of my advice.
Awesome. Let's see. So again, with kind of communicating with fans, like how do you feel about direct messages from your fans, like on Instagram or social media? Or how would you like to be approached, like if a fan wanted to ask you for advice?
Honestly, my DMs are always open, especially like if it is like a very like thoughtful question, or if they're really seeking advice, or if it's just more than, hey, what brush did you use? If it's something more profound than that, then I would love to take the time to interact and chat, because especially with like knowledge. So I'm also going to turn on this other light. There we go. Especially with sharing knowledge with the art community, or like people who are up and coming, or they're self-taught or whatever. Like, we're in an age where it's like knowledge abound, right? Like there's so many sources for any sort of thing. But especially if you want to just like talk to a person to just understand their experience, you have a certain experience and you want to know how to handle it and seek advice. Like I think that should be available to anybody that asks, and it shouldn't be kind of like this exclusive club or anything like that, So my DMs are open. So if you guys want to ask me something, that's totally cool too.
Awesome. Let's see. So you've done holiday cards that are open to the public. Would you encourage others to try and promote their work via physical postcards?
I thought it was fun. It really just started off as like an art trade with like a group of people, and then to be honest, I don't remember when I decided, I'm like, you know what, let's just make a public list, and whoever wants a card, sign up below. And so I think a lot of that comes down to like me just wanting to kind of give back a little. Like, this isn't going to cost you anything. I want to just share like a little bit of joy with you during the holidays or whatever. And I mean, because it's not like I'm also making an individual card for every single person that's different, right? But it's just me kind of like, in a way, giving a little bit back to whoever is receiving the card, just a little bit of something during the holidays, like it's like something that with like no strings attached. But I will say it's a lot of work, especially when there's a lot of people on your list with international addresses involved too, so but I definitely enjoyed doing that. It was, even though it was a lot of hard work, but knowing that I'm creating something that could bring someone like a little bit of joy during the holidays is also a great payoff.
That sounds like such a fun project. So, you know you did that. Do you have any tips for self-motivation or mental health? For example, like when one of your posts doesn't perform well on social media.
That's also a very good question. You guys are coming in with some great questions. I think for mental health, for me, it's an ongoing thing to always improve on. And I definitely still have my up and down days, right? But I think when it comes to a specific post, it would definitely hurt if it's something that I was like actually really proud of, but then like no one else liked it. Be like, oh, okay. So I think as far as like getting past that, like, don't let that like make you fall into a rut or make you think that you don't matter anymore. And it's real easy to fall into those thoughts. But I think I wish I had like the one magic piece of advice that would fix everything, but I definitely don't. But I mean, for example, like, let's say if it's something you're starting to burn out on and you're really feeling like real down on yourself, you feel like your self-worth isn't great, maybe it is like just a sign of you needing to take a step back and a break, like for you to give yourself permission to just not do anything. Like even if it's like literally laying on the floor, staring at the ceiling and being okay of just being, you know, and or even taking like a crack at a different type of hobby that isn't necessarily creative. Like for example, like I was really feeling down in the dumps of not only like my job. This was a couple of years ago, so I was hating my job. I wasn't enjoying the work that I was doing. I felt like I couldn't draw anything that I was happy with. And I still have like this old film camera that I used to shoot film on back in the day. And I literally cleared the dust out of it and I put a roll of film, went to like north of the Golden Gate Bridge, and I just shot photos. And it was like a different type of creative hobby, but it was something that I have not done in a very long time. So even like things, or even like trying a new recipe, or anything that is a step away from what you are doing for most of your career, life, day to day, if you have to just give yourself permission to step back and take how much ever time you need, because there is no deadline for you to come back headstrong and like, look at all this art that I created. But even if it's just like sitting on the couch and catching up on all the shows that you missed out on, like I think in general, you just have to give yourself permission to just be.
Definitely. That is, I feel like everybody kind of needs that advice when you're starting in art, or starting to get, build your following. So for our last question, oh wait, no, not our last question. Being on social media and drawing, because it becomes like you're drawing extra to post on social media, can lead to like physical issues like carpal tunnel or RSI. Do you have any experience with like trying to manage like the amount of time you draw or can draw?
I've definitely fallen into the trap of forgetting to stand up and walk around, or doing just even simple wrist stretches, or forgetting to, hey, maybe draw from your shoulder and not at your wrist. And I think also what helps me is like wearing, like, I have like an Apple Watch that and has like that little reminder, like, hey, you should stand up. Or even like setting a timer for yourself. So like maybe at 10 till you take a break from the screen, from what you're doing, and you go make a cup of coffee, or you go outside for a quick breath of fresh air. And there's also like those apps, those timer apps, like Pomelo, or any of those time management apps. I've used those before. I sometimes just fall off of using that. But that if you need something more like physical, like, you know, telling you, hey, you need to take a break. Because it's sometimes like once you're in a groove, it's kind of hard to like snap yourself out of it to like, okay, I need to step away, you know? So um, it, I think as far as like, I've definitely, I will say I'm lucky enough that I have not gotten any super, super duper hard physical injury to my drawing hand, and I'm still counting my blessings for that. So um, even if it's like you don't have to be like a workout buff to like get away from the computer or drawing or anything like that. I mean, though it does help. But even like doing something like a yoga video for like 10 minutes. There's definitely, if you follow Yoga with Adrienne, love her videos. She has some great, just very quick stretch videos for artists, or not just for artists, but for people who need those like simple stretches. It doesn't have to be like this whole 30-minute thing. But I think, because I'm still working on it myself, so even if it's just even like a simple reminder on your phone, or even just building the habit of like, okay, even if when you start to feel a tinge, you're like, I should probably take a break. Listen to your body, you know, don't try to push through because you have to. You have to listen to your body and your mind too when you're not feeling you're at 100%.
Yeah, I definitely need to do some of those. Like, there's been many times where I realized it was like 12 hours and I'm still at my desk being in a groove.
It doesn't. We're all working from home now, so
Yeah,
at least most of us. Yeah.
that too. Do you have any tips for um, how tips for how you keep from being influenced by followers while you're developing your style?
Tips
Or keep your style like original while you're like.
Okay. So here's the thing about artistic style. I actually talked about this in a talk I gave in San Francisco State a few years back. But I think artistic style and individuality, it's all a culmination of influences in your life. It's literally a melting pot of everything that you've seen, experienced, heard, and and it's also made up of experimentation, right? So like I know when I was developing what I consider, I guess, my style, it's also hard because like I think you as the artist, when you're looking at your stuff, you're like, this isn't anything unique. But it's also because I feel like you're also way too close to the situation. You're not like zoomed out, right? You're not an outsider looking in. But when you're trying to like practice things, like for example, you're drawing hands. Like, how do I draw a cartoon female hand? And then you're looking up all this reference from all sorts of different styles. And then you're trying things out, you're experimenting. And once you find something that you like, that starts to kind of bleed in into what you start developing in your memory, right? And I think it also kind of goes back to drawing mileage, right? So thinking of it as a mileage on a car, like the more that you draw, the more you're gaining that mileage, and also developing kind of like this library in your head of how to interpret shapes and handle different subject matters. And I could definitely say, like, I think at first my style was very, very heavy on like the typical Disney girl, and I think over time I started to kind of like veer off a little bit from that. Like, still do my own variations as I was kind of developing more of that like visual library in my head, and then also like expanding my library in the sense of like, what do I watch? Like, what type of cartoons do I watch? It's not just Disney. It's also Cartoon Network. It's Nickelodeon. It's stop motion from Leica. You know, it's all this different stuff, and that like feeds into how your style kind of develops over time, right? And that's what's great about when you're looking through like your Instagram, you see that change as you grow as a person and as an artist. Like that also morphs as well, because then your interests change too. And I think don't try to let what is popular or trendy or what you think is going to get the most likes because to influence should draw because that's what people like. If you would just want to draw like some wacky out of the world stuff, then you do you, boo. You know, like it shouldn't, there is no right or wrong with that, because like your style should be your own. And it sucks when you're also like, if you're going through art school and you have those teachers like, you shouldn't be drawing like that because it doesn't make sense, when really like your personal art should be a reflection of who you are. And yeah, so that's kind of like my tip, is that it shouldn't, you, don't be afraid of just like literally kind of following your gut. Like, I want to draw my hands like this because I actually enjoy it. Like, you just have to like leave all those comments, all of the backseat driving of art behind you. Like, you know, you just, you can't let all of that, like all those types of comments or people influence or tell you how to do something, because in the end it's you making that art. And you should make it the way you want to. You know, you should interpret those subjects the way you should.
Awesome. Yeah. Definitely the growing your style. Yeah, that can be like so difficult in Instagram with all of the information you're getting constantly. So that was the end of our Q&A. And thank you so much, Crystal. It was so much fun talking to you today, and chatting with you about social media, and hearing all your amazing advice for everyone who wants to try to start building their social media. So this is the end of our Q&A, and thank you all so much for joining us for our 5th episode on social. For our 5th episode of social media presence. And thank you, Crystal, for being a part. Please subscribe and to our channel for future videos. See you next time. Bye.